This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. I'm Jamal and we are delighted to have in our studio Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi to discuss several of our topics. Welcome to Arab Talk, Rabab. So I'm going to start first with the Israeli elections, and then when we talk about the Israeli elections, I just want to, at least make it clear that this is from a Palestinian perspective, and why we're going to be discussing it from a Palestinian perspective and the significance of this. So just a quick summary, and I'm sure for many of our listeners and viewers on Facebook Live, and I'd like also to welcome our viewers on Facebook Live. For those who have been following or maybe not following these elections, and I think they ended up, they were presented as a high drama, but to me, they ended up into an anti-climax because the top-line results, there is no clear winner, even though, for one thing, neither the right-wing bloc led by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, nor the center, this is how Israel describes these blocs led by former military chief of staff Benny Gantz, commanded a majority of the 120 seats in the 22nd Knesset. So neither one... Gantz has a slight advantage as of, I think, earlier today he leads by 2 seats or 2 votes in that case, but neither one basically reached the 61 majority to be a clear winner. And so then other things also happened. Just to give just an idea about the parliamentarian concept or system that Israel has. You need 61 votes to be the clear winner. Neither one reached that. 98% of the votes have been counted as of today. And then the interesting thing, the Arab bloc came third. Mm-hmm. So technically, and some have been describing this as a win to Palestinians with Israeli passports that they went out, and we'll talk about this also. I want to talk about this, if this actually was the silver lining as it has been described in the Israeli media. So I'm just quickly taking a glance here at the last count. From left to right, you have the blue and white, which is Gantz, with 33 in total, and then the Likud, Netanyahu with 31. But then on his side, he has the Yamina party, 7 votes, the Chas, 9 votes, and then the 8 votes from the Jewish party, the UTS party, and then Yisrael Beituna, which is Avigdor Lieberman's party, and many people are saying now, well, Avigdor Lieberman is going to be now the kingmaker in this, and then the blue, white, which is Gantz, party 33, the Labor.
Avigdor Lieberman got 8, right?
Avigdor Lieberman got 8, the Joint List 13. The Democratic Union 5, the Labor Gesher 6, and of course the blue and white. So this is basically the makeup that we have as far as with 98%, and probably will stay the same. So I just want to take your take from a Palestinian perspective on it. How do you see this?
I think if we can maybe just break it down a little bit, the Knesset has 120 seats.
Right.
The Knesset is the Israeli parliament that only dates as far as 1948. There was no Knesset before. This is something that doesn't seem to be a very long time phenomena. As you said, the party that wins, that is able to form a government, needs 61 seats. So then in the Knesset, there is always sort of debating back and forth. So the U.S. media, the dominant media, in the U.S. has been looking at it in terms of what's happening as the whole question of whether Lieberman is the kingmaker, what is the position of where is Netanyahu at, and then when they discuss the Palestinian union, I mean, it's called the Arab Unified List, Joint List. They don't actually say Palestinian at all. I have not seen any discussions about Palestinians. It says Arab, and actually today the New York Times even has an editorial, open editorial by the editor of the Jewish press, who says it is between the Haredi, which is the Orthodox religious Jews, and the Muslim Arabs. And I just didn't have a chance to even comment on it to say, Palestinians are not just Muslims. There are also, and it's not just Muslim Arabs. They are actually Palestinians, and there are a lot of other issues in the elections that are not being talked about. One main issue is that you're talking about debate between Zionist parties and debate between Likud on one hand and Gantz on the other, Netanyahu and Gantz. And when they say center-left, actually, Gantz is not very much center-left. If you want to only talk about, Gantz was mobilizing in April 9th elections, as well as 2 days ago in September 17th, was mobilizing and trying to build support in terms of saying, I killed most Palestinians. I mean, this is...
He was bragging about it.
He was bragging about it. This is the way he was mobilizing. Then he goes and he appears in several Palestinian areas and speaks to the Palestinian press. But then even the New York Times and all the mainstream pundits in the U.S., the way they describe it is that, Gantz is making overtures towards, quote-unquote, the Arabs, the Palestinians. He's going to fight crime. He's going to give more hospital beds for Palestinians. And this is kind of what he was talking about. And then, so the question is, nobody even asked about, first of all, are the Palestinians the only people in Israeli society who need hospital beds? Are Palestinians the only ones in Israeli society who need crime and so on? And then you talk further about it, which actually resembles a lot the way discussions of U.S. elections happen, in the sense that Palestinian demands and Palestinian concerns get reduced to only some kind of crumbs that you get off the table without actually recognizing and acknowledging that you're talking about the Zionist debate between different Zionist groups that is sitting on top of the Palestinians. It is Palestinians inside Israel are the only ones who are allowed to participate in Israeli elections. Israel controls almost 5 million Palestinians under its rule between the 1948 areas, the Palestinians who vote, the people in the West Bank, people in Gaza, and even Jerusalem that was annexed by Israel to Israel, has the people who live in Jerusalem are not voting. So actually, A, you're talking about a very small number of Palestinians. B, you're not talking about the serious issues there. You're talking about the question of colonialism, question of apartheid, question of racism. 3 is that the Palestinian concerns are represented in the media as if Palestinians are only concerned about a couple of socioeconomic issues that do not concern the Jewish electorate or other people. The other thing that I think is really missing from the elections, not only from a Palestinian perspective, but if we think about the whole question of who represents Jewishness, what is Jewishness, including in Israel, it is a very Eurocentric, Ashkenazi, middle-class perspective. So I think there is something really problematic in the way that it is discussed, and it reminds me of the way U.S. elections are discussed. Only Republicans and Democrats, until you have a real issue that gets discussed, then it's forced upon the mainstream. So the question is that whether it's going to be Netanyahu or Gantz who will be forming the government, and all the Zionist pundits are saying it should be a national unity government. So
well, that's what Netanyahu has been calling for.
And Gantz and Lieberman is saying, yes, he wants national unity because he says that Palestinians cannot be part of it. And he talks about also the Orthodox Jews and so on. So it's very different, two different kind of like ways of looking at it. On one hand, it's sort of like excluding any religious groups within Israel, which I actually think is quite discriminatory. I don't agree with the right wingers who were trying to colonize more of Palestine, but it's actually religious discrimination if you want to exclude, number one. But when you say no Palestinians are going to be involved, no Arabs involved, and so on, and we need national unity. When you say what do you mean by nation and what do you mean by unity? On what basis are you talking about that? This is the stuff that remains hidden. This is the stuff that doesn't get discussed. So you wanna? Yeah.
No. I wanna actually just break it down a little bit more, so at least people have a clear idea about when we talk about these elections and when we talk about the the inclusion or not the inclusion of Palestinians in this formula, and why. Because some voices will say, look at it. Israel is a democracy.
Right.
Number one,
It's the
and
only
these are
democracy in the
and these
region.
are arguments.
Yes,
I want to put these valid arguments that people put on the table, and they'll say, in Israel you have more parties than what you have right here in the United States. Between Democrats and Republicans, you have
And proportional representation. It's proportional
exactly.
representation
So you
also,
have this, and this is the beauty about the parliamentarian system. You don't have one dominant person taking, winner takes it all. That kind of thing. So when you look at this argument, and then the other part of the argument, they say for the first time, and this is the silver lining that now even the Israeli media is trying to kind of put out there, that, hey, more, of course, they refer to Palestinians as Arab Israelis. More Arab Israelis are going and voting, and now they're the third
largest bloc in the Knesset.
Largest bloc in they can actually be the leader of the opposition.
Right.
In which there is a major argument about this, which also shows, also see the racist side, because they're saying the leader of the opposition receives
access to security
to security briefings. Are they going to allow them?
Yeah, but I alone said no way. We're going to give them diluted reports. We're not going to give them all the security.
So here are they? Yeah. So then this also highlights the question if they are actually equal citizens or not. That's the whole thing. I mean, here the leader of the opposition, whether it's in Israel or in the UK, for example, they receive sensitive,
of course,
security briefings, and so to talk about this, because you have the Palestinians with Israeli citizenships, they are about 1.5, 1.6 million.
Right.
However, Israel controls the land,
and I think 64% voted.
Yeah, they had a higher.
It was about 64. But last time it was 49. Now 64. Not 100%.
No, not 100%.
So I think we also need to talk about the people who did not vote as well as the people who voted.
Well,
because we're discussing it from a Palestinian perspective.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. But then Israel controls the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River.
That's right.
By air, by land, by sea. There is no question about it. All the borders under their control.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, let's pass that charade that you have the Palestinian Authority in control.
Right.
Palestinian Authority leadership cannot leave its own territory without
including
the permission,
the president.
including the president, all the ministers without a special permission.
They can't cross one checkpoint to the other.
Without
from
a
one
special
Palestinian area A city to another Palestinian area A city. If they get stopped at the checkpoint, that is staffed by Israeli military.
So we know. I mean, this is establishing 100% full Israeli control over the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River.
Yeah.
Now we said 1.6 million Palestinians.
But before we even go that, let's just establish one point, that when people talk about democracy, there is a big question mark, and they need to put it between parentheses, because even for Jews, there isn't complete democracy.
We'll get to the weeds later on. So you're taking us to the weeds.
Okay. Sure.
Now, but I want to make it very basic and very simple, because now you have 1.6 million Palestinians who can vote.
Right.
The total population of the Palestinians on historic Palestine is about 6.5 million.
Right.
This is 6.2 million to 6.5 million.
Right. Okay.
So you have about 4.5 million Palestinians who are deprived of voting. And why this is very important when people talk about this. When you talk about Jewish settlers or Jewish colonial settlers in the West Bank who can vote, living really in the midst of Palestinian towns and villages and etc., they can vote. Like Area C, for example, they can vote. Palestinians are not allowed to vote.
Right.
Residents of Jerusalem who have an Israeli ID
And have to pay taxes.
Which they pay the Arnona, the Israeli Arnona tax. They are allowed to vote only in municipal elections, so they can vote for a mayor, for example. But they are not allowed to vote for the prime minister and so forth. So they are what? Half citizens, quarter citizens. What rights do they have? So you look at this, you could poke a lot of holes in this.
No, they're actually non-citizens.
They are, but I'm just saying.
Considered officially citizens.
Well, the ID basically, actually, if you read the ID, it doesn't even translate into permanent residence. It says temporary residence. So,
and by the way, just to be clear, Israeli passports do not acknowledge Palestinians as Arab nationality. They would say Muslim, Druze, Bedouin, but they do not say Christian. They recognize religious and ethnic and locational identification, but they actually do not recognize Arabness as an identity, let alone Palestinian. So that's not even acknowledged. I mean, you could be Jewish and you would be Israeli, but you are not. There is no such thing as Arab or Palestinian. That doesn't even exist. So
no, they never use the word, for one thing, they never use the word Palestinians. So why we're having this discussion, what I'm saying is to clarify when Palestinians are up in arms and they're complaining, say, or using the word apartheid, which it is, and that they have been denied the right, to choose, and they have no voice in these elections, and why it is very important for Palestinians, because at the end of the day, I actually would feel funny, to tell you the truth, to be the expert, which, by the way, U.S. media does not shy away from bringing all kinds of experts that never been to the country or they're not part of the communities or anything. But I actually will be hesitant, let's say, to be the expert on Egyptian elections. I'd rather have an Egyptian talk about, and I will be bringing someone, an Israeli colleague of mine, hopefully at some point, to speak about the Israeli elections from their own perspective. But because Palestinians live on the land and they are part of the population, today's population, which is about 13 million people, half the population, if not more, and 4.5 million of them have been excluded, then it's very important for us to discuss it.
Right. Yes, of course. And I think it's really important to also discuss what happened, how did the Palestinians participate in the elections, who participated, because I think, and again, from a Zionist propaganda viewpoint here, Hasbara, it is presented that, look, we, the Zionists, allow the Arabs to vote, so we are the most democratic place.
We're doing them a favor.
So, and then the whole thing, there is multiple problems with this statement. One is that it ignores the fact that Israel is established on Palestine, on top of Palestine. It ignores the fact that Palestinians, and the people who voted, the 64% of the Palestinians inside Israel who voted, actually do not have many rights. They don't have many rights, including even Palestinians who serve in the Israeli military. And the numbers are less and less, but even those who serve in the Israeli military don't have rights to be able to stop their homes from being destroyed, to be able to get permits to build. Palestinians in the Nakab area, for example, from the Bedouin community who do have Israeli citizenship and some serve in the Israeli military, they could not stop the Israeli state from destroying their villages and forcibly locating from one place to the other. It did not really work. So when you talk about the whole question of Israeli democracy and representation and so on, it's a facade. And the reason I keep also talking about it, because, and I know we're not talking yet about San Francisco State, but we did have two days ago, on September 16th and 17th, the SFSU Constitution Day Conference, and we were actually talking about citizenship and constitution in the United States, and we have an indigenous scholar, we had an African American scholar, we have multiple people talking about what does it mean to have the promise for representation. Israel does not have a Bill of Rights, does not have a constitution, does not want to define what it is about, and so on. So that's even absent. But even if you think about the promise of citizenship, there is a lot of discussions. Do people belong? Do they not belong? How do they deal with it? And the reason I'm mentioning that in respect to Palestinians inside Israel is that I believe there is multiple reasons for the vote. I think it's really important to also remember that 64%, that means that, 36% did not participate? 30, yeah, 36% did not participate. And people who do not participate, there are very multiple reasons for the Palestinians inside Israel to decide to participate or not. Last year, when we did the delegation during the Teaching Palestine conference, we met with many Knesset members, including Haneen Zu'bi. And Haneen Zu'bi...
She quit.
She quit, yeah. And so we were asking her, because she ran in April, and she was saying that she's not allowed to speak in the Knesset. She cannot introduce bills. She cannot debate bills. She's completely banned by her fellow Knesset members, for her fellow MPs. And so we were asking, there is a big debate among Palestinians to participate or not to participate. If you participate, are you making it possible to legitimize Israel and say that this is an Israeli democracy? If you don't participate, what does it mean? So I think people are really mixed up about participating or not. Part of the people who did not participate for political reasons. I mean, some people do not recognize Israeli legitimacy at all and refuse to participate, and there are larger numbers. And some people participated because Netanyahu made a lot of racist statements talking about Arabs.
Well, this is a segue because actually, and then I'll hold that thought.
That's fine.
I want to go over some of these racist statements by the entire Israeli and leadership and the different leaders
at different times.
At different times,
yes.
and trying to intimidate basically the Palestinian population. And I'll start with Netanyahu. So Netanyahu made it clear. This is a quote from Netanyahu. He said, "Israel isn't a state of all its citizens. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people and it alone." So I'll have you comment on the state of all the citizens versus the Jewish state. Then the Gantz, who might be the new prime minister, and I think he will. I think even for the Israeli public, they are looking for a change. But especially if you leave it to
he has more seats anyway, and he's more able to.
Well, also I think if it goes to the president, he will ask Gantz to try first to form the government, and so this is what he was bragging about. 6,231 targets were destroyed, and that's talking about hitting Gaza. Parts of Gaza were sent back to the Stone Age. I mean, he's a military man. He only kind of answers to force and power, and that's his background. Then you have the kingmaker who can make and break this whole coalition, because if Avigdor Lieberman decides to go back to Netanyahu's lap, Netanyahu will be the prime minister. So he can make that choice. And Avigdor Lieberman, he said, those who are against us, meaning about the Palestinians with Israeli passports, deserve to have their heads chopped off with an axe. I mean, this guy wants a violent...
He's a very peaceful man.
Yeah. So this is Avigdor Lieberman. And then Shaked, she said,
Shaked,
what's so horrifying about understanding that the entire Palestinian people is the enemy? She was asking this as a question. So she's saying Palestinians with the citizens of Israel are also the enemy. And then Bennett, he said, I've killed lots of Arabs in my life. There is no problem with that. So these are, I'm just using these sound bites, and we don't have the sound bites, so I'm reading them.
Yes.
But these are at different times, starting with Netanyahu. So Netanyahu, basically, his party, the Likud, they've taken the position to say, and they've been pushing.
And he said, Zionists, we're going to form a Zionist, this is a place for Zionists, it's not a place
so
for
they're saying to you,
this
is, we're not talking about democracy, we're not talking about a state for all its citizens, because that's the definition of a democracy, really. And he's saying, if you're not Jewish, you don't have a place there. You could live there, but you're not going to be on an equal footing.
Even though you're indigenous, you're actually living temporarily and tentatively and on contingent basis. So you actually never know when your homes are going to be destroyed. And Palestinian homes have been known to be destroyed again and again and again. And I'm not talking about the Palestinians in the 67 areas of the West Bank and Gaza. I'm not talking about Sur Baher that was destroyed last month, a building of 100 families living in it that actually had a permit. I'm talking about Palestinians who are Israeli citizens. These are the same people who participated in the elections, whose homes keep getting destroyed destroyed again and again, and who don't receive permits to be able to build and so on. While Netanyahu, I want to remind our listeners, I know you know this, Jamal, is that in the summer he also authorized many more colonies, many more housing units in the settlements, in the colonies. So it is not only that he was threatening what he was going to do if elected, because he was actually appealing to the settler base. It's exactly as Trump, whenever he talks about all these races, makes all the racist statements against the undocumented, against the congresswomen, the four women of color congresswomen. When he made the statements against Elijah Cummings and so on, he was also appealing to a particular white supremacist base. So it's very similar, and I think it's really important for people in the U.S. who are listening to this to also not think, because the way the U.S. media and the U.S. especially supportive of Zionist media, that they try to present it as if Israel is an exception. Israel is a democracy among a sea of despot Arabs. Israel is making the desert bloom. Israel is doing this and this. So what happens is that people stop the comparative analysis in their mind, and they go to a place where they treat Israel exceptionally unlike other states. And what we're trying to do is to say we want to treat Israel like any other state. We want to hold it to the same accountability, the same principles, and look at its elections and so on like any other state that is part of the states of the world, and also look at what is happening in terms of colonialism, in terms of appropriation of all Palestinian rights, whether it is you're talking about the indigenous Palestinian, you're talking about the colonialism, you're talking about occupation, and you're talking about racism. So all of this stuff is there. So it's the statements are, and it's very interesting because the U.S. media only talks about the statement when it comes to questions about debate between various Zionist leaders in Israel. The rest of the time, we don't hear anything about that. Like nobody is, and the statements are happening all the time. Every single day they're taking place. If you follow the news, if you follow alternative media, you know it's going on. I mean, one of the main things that just happened, 2 days ago, the Haaretz, which is the liberal Zionist newspaper, its cultural editor, made very, very racist statements about Palestinians, saying that Palestinians should be vomited out. I mean, this is one of the liberal places. So this is the kind of discourse that is taking place among Israeli Zionist Jews. And I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind.
Right. We have a lot of things to talk about. I want one final comment. Maybe let's make that brief because we have other topics. I'd like to talk about the Canadian Prime Minister blackface incident or several incidents. I also like to talk about what's going on locally right here on campus in San Francisco State University, and an update on your case there.
Yes.
And the last question about the Israeli elections is, how do you see the 13 seats gained by the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship?
Yeah.
Is this good, or is participation good, or
I will say,
or not?
I will say, let's talk about this contingently, in the sense that it shows the power of the bloc, but also let's not forget that the Arab list is not even unified. I mean, people do not. It's a unified list that ran for elections, that basically ran to defy the racism of Netanyahu. Now, when you finish with that people, 64% again, and I want to remind people that 36% did not vote, okay? That's really important. And within the 64%, there isn't necessarily agreement on everything. One of the major issues is about what is the legitimacy of Zionism in the state of Israel. Where are the Palestinian leaders standing in that? It's a very tenuous position for Palestinians, for a Palestinian to be an Israeli citizen, because on one hand you have the citizenship, and it is something that you have gotten it as a result of the colonization of your land. So on May 15, 1948, you stop being a Palestinian indigenous to Palestine, and you become seen as a minority in the settler colonial state that occupies your land, and then you are placed under military curfew, martial law from
Until
1948, 1966. But then it continues again, because if you look at the history of the Palestinians in Israel, the imprisonment, everything that has happened, the chasing, the racism, it's all in there.
So quickly, is it good or bad? I know we have...
Okay, on one hand, I'm happy that they got 13% of the electorate, but at the same time, I really want to hold that tentatively and not just be completely enthusiastic about that, because we are dealing with a racist state that is never, ever, as long as it is the state, as long as Israel is a state of the Jews and not a state for all its citizens, there will never, ever be equality for the Palestinians. They will never be full citizens. They will never, ever be able to walk without looking over their shoulders.
You're listening to the voice of Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi, the director of AMCHA program at San Francisco State University. We're very delighted to have her here for the full hour. This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. And I want to now switch gears, because this is something... I know you talk about, you teach it,
yes.
Really. We talk about Orientalism,
yes.
and racism and whatever under those categories. So my question, of course, just a reminder to our listeners, because I thought I wasn't going to talk about this, and I said, no, this is too important not to kind of ignore it.
Right.
You know, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologized again today for wearing blackface. Now, we found out in 3...
Blackface with a turban.
Yeah, but actually there are 3 different occasions. This was the first story that was broke by the Times magazine, and so then another video surfaced, and he's just running around just with a blackface, another event. So now he apologized again. For now, we know the 3 separate incidents, and he said that he did not know how many times he had put on racist makeup. So he actually, because now we know, we started with 1 now, we have 3 incidents, and so I've been monitoring the debate, including I posted the picture and asked the question actually to my followers on Facebook. You know, is this racism? Is this Orientalism? Is it ignorance, or all of the above?
It is all of the above, yeah.
And some people answered all of the above, and others were, no, you know, you're taking it too much. He was young. It was a party. It was this. And they were making excuses. And then many of the comments who came in his support, by the way, and I appreciate all comments. I actually appreciate my followers on Facebook, because they're all over the country. And these came from Canadians. And they came from Muslim Canadians who were defending him vehemently. And they were saying, he's like very liberal. He has a Muslim on his cabinet, and he reached out to the Sikhs community, so he has a very diverse. Why are you being hard on him? And I said, I'm not being hard. I'm just stating the news, the facts.
You should be hard on him.
You know.
I mean, people should be held accountable for their actions. And I think if you reverse, I mean, if this is quite racist. And the blackface and the turban is both racist and Oriental.
Well, this is people don't understand. It seems we've seen that in of course, the Supreme Court's judge hearing, right? Kavanaugh. Also, the same thing with the blackface and others, right? And there seems to be a lot of people don't realize the significance of this.
And
Can you explain the significance of it?
The history. They don't know the history of what is called minstrelsy, I think, minstrel show. That in the late 19th century, early 20th century, actors, especially in vaudeville, would go around entertaining crowds and painting their faces black, and it was borrowing on all the racist stereotypes against the African American community, against black community. It was reinforcement of stereotypes around the various ones that we know about. And it was, so you always would question, hey, why don't you actually have black actors playing black faces? Number one. Secondly, what is it that allows members of a dominant community to feel entitled to use the lives, to appropriate, to steal the lives of other people, and also distort them in a very racist way? Why is that? And then the third question then comes up. When that happens, when this entitlement of white supremacy continues again and again. This privilege is displayed again and again. And it's quite offensive and it's quite racist. Why is it that people justify that people could get away with it? I don't understand. I don't understand why is it in every other case. I think in any time you hear anything anti-Semitic, anything Islamophobic, anything racist against African Americans, anything against immigrants, against Latinx people, Asian Americans, indigenous people, anywhere around the world, it's very offensive and people should be held accountable. Yet there is different ways of treating. Like look at the way Netanyahu's racism is being displayed. 24 hours. His thing was suspended on Facebook. That's it. He wasn't banned forever and ever. So, but then this is I'm afraid that this thing will pass with Trudeau, because there are a lot of people saying his liberalism justifies, and nothing justifies. One injustice does not justify another injustice. We need to hold people accountable on all forms of justice and injustice. So it is not okay. And by the way, I need to say also that there have been many in universities across the United States and Canada and elsewhere, students who have also been doing this. And this is at the same time that white supremacy is rising, and militant, violent militias are actually growing and growing. And so at the same time that there were frat boys and people in Halloween and so on playing, whether they're painting blackface or they were doing all the Orientalist things about Arabs and Palestinians and third world people and so on, you also, many of the kids in black students and so on, they'll find the noose outside their door. Many Palestinian students have been attacked on campus. Many students who support justice in for Palestine, whether they are Palestinian or non-Palestinian, have also been targeted and attacked and silenced. So this stuff is going on. And I think if we are really serious about confronting racism, we need to hold people accountable. It is not okay for somebody to say, oh, I was young. Why?
Well, actually,
did it even occur to you to do it when you were young?
And he wasn't that young. He was an adult. And actually, the first time the picture came, which was kind of strange because it was right after 2001. And we're talking about the 21st century. We're talking about after
9/11, 2001,
exactly.
in a turban.
And then later, and then he had it. He now we have at least 3 incidents where, and now he says he admits to those 3 incidents
because we haven't seen the rest.
We haven't seen the rest.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that
he actually. But one incident is a problem.
But I do appreciate that he apologized. I do appreciate that he apologized and said, I didn't know that this was a racist act, and now I understand. He said that. He said that he didn't know that.
He didn't take our classes.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I kind of like put a lot of it on the ignorance aspect of things, which is very sad.
Ignorance that's enabled by privilege and entitlement.
And part of the Orientalism that Edward Said talks about.
Yes.
And then, but I was actually surprised by his defenders. I mean, that kind of surprised me because and this is just because he's a liberal, that's at least how they see him,
it just doesn't justify.
Doesn't justify.
And so, I think this is also another aspect of things that we teach about Frantz Fanon, and with all due respect to people who are defending him among your followers, this is internalized colonialism. When you actually accept and justify for people who are actually quite racist against us, justify their behavior because they are liberal. Why can't they be liberal and also not racist? Why do they have to be either or? Why is it? This is, and I'm not even, I don't want to reverse the equation and say, why is it that we are held to a higher standard? Because everybody should be held to a higher standard. I don't want to say that it's okay to do it in terms of any other people, and it's okay for our communities to do it. It's not okay for anybody to do it. If we stand for justice, we stand for justice for all. No ifs or buts about it.
So I want to also switch gears now because we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to talk about, get your updates on what's going on with San Francisco State University. And for our listeners, we've talked about it several times, and you've actually won a monumental case where the Lawfare Project and other organizations basically...
And there were almost 1,000 lawyers.
With their 1,000 lawyers and multi-million dollars spent on taking you to court along with San Francisco State University.
Yes.
And for the 3rd time.
Yes.
And until they lost the case
In a federal court.
and it was taken basically they lost with prejudice. This was the decision by Judge Orek.
Right.
And
October 2008.
yeah, and then so we said, well, that's the end of it. Now they learned their lesson, and apparently they have not. Because recently, let me just start with at least one story. There is a group now, a whole new group. Every time this is based actually on a headline on the J Weekly. Jewish groups allege SFSU professor, meaning you violating state laws through misuse of department Facebook page. This is, and 80 Jewish groups, which I wanted to comment on the signatories, are signatories on a letter alleging that San Francisco State University Associate Professor Rabab Abdulhadi is violating California law by using a Facebook page, and so on. And anyway, they sent a letter. It was organized by this dubious group called the AMCHA Initiative at Santa Cruz, which they say they are a nonprofit group that investigates anti-Semitism on college campuses. And I'll actually comment on AMCHA. Right. And then others, from the Horowitz people to kind of the same group now. They're trying a different way to basically harass you, report you to the president of, by the way, they're going after the new president of San Francisco State University, even though they've taken you to court, spent millions of dollars, and they failed, and now they just collect a bunch of signatures, and this is part of this whole harassment of and trying to silence academic freedom, and they're back at it.
Yes. So let me just do a segue between the Israeli elections and the San Francisco State. So amidst what's going on with the Israeli elections, a story escapes about Israel trying to create telefreaks from the Jerusalem, one area to the Jerusalem, to take them to the old city, destroying the landscape of the old city of Jerusalem and bypassing Palestinian communities in order to take them to what they call the city of David.
They want to turn Jerusalem into Disneyland.
Yeah, but the city of David is underneath, they claim the city of David is underneath the Palestinian city of Silwan. And the inauguration of, quote unquote, the city of David was done by none other than U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Friedman. Now, it's very interesting because this story gets hidden. But one of the things that I've noticed in this story, that one of the biggest advocates for this is none other than Nir Barkat. Nir Barkat is the former mayor of Jerusalem, and he is a very strong member of Likud, who actually came to San Francisco State in April 2016. He came to the Bay Area to raise funds for the APAC, American Public Affairs Committee, which is a registered lobby for a foreign government for Israel. And then they brought him to San Francisco State, SF Hillel, Department of Jewish Studies, and the Jewish Community Relations Council. And there was a big protest by students from various backgrounds at San Francisco State. And he had to basically go in a corner and speak to his very low and so on, because students were kept chanting. And this is one of the incidents, by the way, around which I was sued, and both a university independent investigator was hired to investigate what happened, the Nir Barkat affair, and came out and said, yes, the students were protesting against Israel. They were protesting against, they called the mayor, Barkat,
which is protected under the First Amendment.
But there was no violence involved, and this had nothing to do with Jewishness. So but then the lawsuit came in 2017 and said that I am involved in creating anti-Jewish animus at San Francisco State University. The other one was the Know Your Right fair, where Hillel was not given a table at the fair, that students felt that this was kind of like inviting ICE, and they already missed the deadline. So I commented on that, and I said, just because you have white privilege does not mean you have to go to every single birthday party. I mean, just like a kid who you don't get invited, you get over it, okay? And it wasn't anti-Jewish, because Jewish Voice for Peace was there. There were a lot of groups organized and so on. In any case, Judge Orek, in his opinion, 41-page opinion, when he dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice, and they really went at it for 18 months, said just because she's anti-Zionist and support Palestinian resistance does not make her anti-Semitic. He basically tore apart all the arguments that tried to link me, the Ahmed Studies program, ethnic studies, the 1968 student strike at SFSU, with what they call anti-Semitism. And it was all allegations. And by the way, the first group that actually attacked me personally at San Francisco State in 2013 was none other than the AMCHA initiative and its leader, Tammy Rossman Benjamin, who is now doing this and who has done it, by the way, last month and has done it in 2018 when I criticized President Wang when he said, I welcome Zionists. And I said, this is exclusionary of Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, anybody who supports justice, including our Jewish sisters and brothers, for whom Israel does not represent, does not speak in their name. And I raised the question of who owns Jewishness. Now, they're very upset about that. Because when I said that then, and this is a continuing, by the way, this is the same coalition. Sometimes they have 60 signatures, sometimes they have 80 signatures, fluctuates, whoever they can get. But if you look at them, there is Israel on Campus Coalition, which is a very shadowy group that has been exposed in the lobby that was on Al Jazeera, that Al Jazeera censored, but then Electronic Intifada got a hold of and put the 4 parts. I invite people to look at it because it's actually very, very sobering about the extent of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Sheldon Adelson, the casino mogul and multi-billionaire, who's also funding all of this stuff, as well as people inside the Trump administration outside. The Israel, what we call the Israel.
Just want to comment on AMCHA because, we know they have big money behind them and all these organizations, even though they're shadowy. And they were part of a major investigation on the forward.
Yes.
Which uncovered that the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco and of Los Angeles and others
of Boston, Chicago,
have funneled in excess of $300 million to stoke Islamophobia, racism, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian.
To AMCHA, to Campus Watch, to
and
David
one of them is
Horowitz.
AMCHA.
Yes,
one
and to Lawfare. AMCHA is one of them. Lawfare is one of them. Turning Point, which is a white supremacist group. All of these groups have been funded.
Canary Mission, all these.
And the money rose. The money every single year. And it's very, very interesting because if you track the attacks against us, against me, against the Ahmed Studies program, against activism on campus, including Palestine-centered activism by Palestinian students, you can see the money is rising and their funding. So you wonder, why is it that Jewish Community Federation, which is a community organization that prides itself, that actually claims to be for justice, for fairness, for equal, for
the
human
only thing
rights,
that they said is
except for Palestine.
No, the only thing that they've said now, they've stopped funding
the Canary Mission. Yes, but the others are still being funded.
And
it's
also the Helen Diller Foundation was also funding Canary Mission.
Right.
But when I looked at the list, several of those names
they're all on the
immediately. They are part of this whole
the Jewish
group.
Federation, yes, and this is very problematic. But what they are bothered with is that this and I believe the reason that they keep attacking us again and again is because they're really trying to silence me. They're trying to get me fired, and they're trying to shut down the Ahmed Studies program and criminalize campus activism, which is all together. Ahmed Studies talks about justice-centered knowledge production. This is a program that has been academically approved by the Senate of San Francisco State, has been approved by the provost, by the president, went to the CSU. It's been accredited. It's a academic program that's accredited with 22 courses that fulfill general education and so on. They want to silence us because we speak truth to power, because we speak about justice, we teach about justice. They're very bothered with it. So they have one campaign after another. So even though they failed in the lawsuit, and by the way, the Lawfare lawsuit of 2017, that the one that you spoke about, that Judge Orrick dismissed with prejudice, actually spoke about every single accusation, false allegation that AMCHA waged against me. From the fact that Tammy Benjamin herself also claimed that I engaged in glorifying the murder of Jews. Now, this was non-founded. It was a lie. Then she came and she accused me of misusing university funds in 2014 and organized also similar groups. And there are 3 audits of the university were done, and all of them proved to be unfounded. Then she wasn't happy about that. She went to the state controller, and the university did 5-year audit of my travel. And so it continues to happen. Then when I said, and I criticized President Wang on Zionists are welcome, they said the same thing. Every single time we start making gains at San Francisco State and building the program, for which I was hired, by the way. I mean, I did not come and impose myself on San Francisco State. I was heavily recruited to come and build this program. I came, I'm doing my job. I believe that I'm doing my job, and they don't want me to do my job because students are learning about Islamophobia. Students are learning about injustices. Students are learning about how justice in for Palestine connects with justice for all people everywhere. And they are very bothered with it. So AMCHA, by the way, this latest campaign also follows on a campaign that they started also in July. In July, they came up with a campaign because they were very troubled because I went to the Queer Liberation March and I interviewed people, including young Jewish trans kids who were wearing the yarmulke. And they were there, and I said, because, AMCHA and Lawfare claim that Jewish students on campus cannot walk around wearing the yarmulke because they are very threatened by me. So I went and asked the kids, I said, why? And they said, no, we're feeling very okay here. We're very happy in the Palestine contingent and so on. So I posted the banner that Queers Against Israeli Apartheid from New York were holding, which says Zionism equals racism, Palestine is a queer issue, boycott, divest, sanction. They were very, very bothered with it. And then it was posted on the Ahmed Facebook page, which is actually an informal Facebook page of Ahmed that was set up by friends and alumni and so on to support Ahmed studies because we don't have resources to be able to improve our website at the university. We have no money. We have no operating budget. We have no staff. I have been stripped of the 2 faculty members that I've negotiated in my contract. So I'm really trying to make do with whatever. So one of the things we do is we stream things live. We put things everywhere to reach a larger number of people because education and public education is our goal. Now, the reason they do this and the reason they get away with it is because San Francisco State has only 1/3 of its funding from the state. The rest of the funding comes from private sources that are not transparent.
So this is how they use the leverage.
Yeah, and not held accountable. So we don't really know what happens, all the secret stuff that comes in and all the pressure. We do know that the Correct Foundation, for example, gave $1.7 million to San Francisco State and took it back because the Correct Foundation, which is a pro-Zionist organization, was not happy with the way the university punished Palestinian students for the Barakat protest. They wanted them to be punished more. Like, it's not enough to be put on the Canary mission. It's not enough to face sexual violence. It's not enough to have your job being called and for you to be asked to be fired. It's not enough that you actually have had to escort from your job to your car as young kids. This is students that is happening to them. It's not enough. They wanted them to be even further punished, and they wanted all the rules to be tightened more at San Francisco State. Yeah.
So we have a few minutes. What's next now? I mean, they've lost their big case. They're still coming back at you. Yes. Trying to egg the university, basically.
Yes.
Going after the new president of the university. I seen articles actually that started by AMCHA, like small blogs, made their way all the way to Israeli media, like the Jerusalem Post.
Yes, it's the Jerusalem Post, it's the Times of Israel, it's in every single, but I mean, this campaign has been going on for quite a while, and then the more we defeat them, the nastier they get.
Are you going to quit?
No, of course not.
Okay, this is the question.
I'm not, no. First of all, I'm not quitting. I came here to do my job. I'm doing my job. I'm going to continue doing my job, number one. Secondly, I actually sued the university. I have 2 lawsuits in the university, in federal court and in state court. The university tried to get, the university lawyers, which are also paid really well, tried to get the lawsuit to be dismissed. And then what happened is that the university, the judge refused to dismiss the lawsuit, and now the lawsuit is going forward. So now the judge, another federal judge, now we have 2 federal judges, right, is saying that actually the lawsuit can go forward. So it is going forward. And now we will see that with the state court, they're supposed to respond about the violations of my labor rights, of my faculty rights, of my protection. And as you know, Jamal, that I've also been receiving death threats, and the university is not doing anything about that. It's basically, but I always believe that there is hope. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe. And we actually, justice is on our side. Truth is on our side. We have a huge community. We have huge number of students. And I'm talking about community. I'm not talking Arab Muslims and Palestinians. I'm I'm talking about everybody who supports justice. I'm here. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to continue doing my job. I'm an educator. I'm going to continue educate, whether they like it or they don't like it. Of course they don't like it, and they're going to get nastier and nastier and nastier. The question is they cannot silence the truth, and they cannot silence us.
Well, on that note, they cannot silence the truth. You've been listening to the voice of Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi. We're always a pleasure to have you. It's never
Pleasure to
boring.
be
It's
here.
never enough time to talk to you. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. If you want to listen to our archived shows, go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, also on our Facebook page. We will talk to you next week.